Welcome to the On-Premise IT Roundtable, the only podcast that dares to be both on topic and on location. My name is Tom Hollingsworth, and I am a member of Gestalt IT, and each episode we bring you the perspectives and viewpoints of a group of luminaries in the IT space. Today's episode is brought to you by Keeper Security, but first I'd like to take a moment for our friends to introduce themselves before we get to the premise of today's episode, starting with Evan.
Thank you, Tom. My name is Evan Mincer. I'm an information security manager located in the Philadelphia region. I can be found on Twitter at Evan Mincer.
Thank you, Evan. Gerard?
Hey, what's going on, everyone? My name is Gerard Cavalinas. I'm the founder of Tech House 570, and you can find me at gcavalinas on Twitter, Gerard Cavalinas on LinkedIn, and at Tech House 570.
Thank you. And our special guest today, Zane.
Hey, Zane Bond here. I'm with Keeper Security, and I'm happy to be here chatting on all kinds of fun topics. Hopefully it'll be a fun conversation.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for joining us. Let's jump into today's premise. As mentioned, this episode is brought to you by Keeper Security, and one of the things that we've heard a lot about over several years in security is the importance of VPNs. Starting back in the old days, it was a way to create network tunnels through the common internet to provide a secure transport layer. But it required a lot of heavy lifting. We had to have, big, thick clients on our laptops that did IPsec tunneling. And if anybody's ever tried to set up the phase 2 negotiation for IKE, you know what a pain in the neck that can be. But we've modified that. We have SSL VPNs now. We have a lot of other things. And quite honestly, I can't really even remember the last time that I fired up my VPN client outside of a hacker conference where I was trying to keep my stuff secure. Because a lot of applications have started using things like TLS transmission in order to make sure that all of their data is encrypted in flight, which leads me to the premise for today's episode that, well, VPNs aren't really required anymore. I want to jump in with by asking Evan this question, because Evan, I know that you've had a lot of experience in some pretty secure environments. Are you seeing a lot of the security that we used to kind of have to bolt on after the fact being integrated into the applications and the devices that are being used on these, say like a healthcare network?
It's starting to. So I'm seeing a lot more cloud usage. And to your point, when you're using cloud, there is no need for a VPN because it might be, in a Microsoft or GCP environment. So why would you be on VPN for those? Because really you're going to be hairpinning back to the organization. The only thing that I would disagree with on the VPN point is any company that has stuff that's on premises, then you have to get back there. And I'm also seeing there's the old Windows management. If companies are still using GPOs, then you can't update remote computers unless they're on VPN.
Yeah, it's that kind of problem you run into where it has to be in my network for the GPO to be applied to it, because it turns out that as great as Microsoft is when it comes to doing policy work, the networking side of it probably needs a little bit of improvement, I guess would be a good way to put it. Gerard, are you seeing something similar? Are you seeing customers that are going primarily to the cloud saying, well, everything's secure now, so we don't need to worry about VPNs?
Well, believe it or not, and it's very interesting because we work with so many clients. When I was in healthcare, they just were completely still focused on the VPN aspect, right? Because as when Evan said, you still have so many, different shares and different aspects that you still need to kind of connect back to that internal network. As far as cloud-based, there's been some rumblings. We're looking into some different stuff, but I haven't personally seen a lot of it. I know a lot of people are still trying to focus a lot more on just kind of the old Windows management, and some people are still focused on, if it's not broken, don't fix it. But I know there's so many better ways to be able to connect wirelessly and go through the VPN and have a safer connection.
Yeah. Now, Zane, you're kind of on the other side of this because as part of Keeper Security, you've worked with clients that maybe have come to you asking for VPN-like features. Are you seeing clients that are saying, maybe we don't need this, or worse yet, are you seeing clients who thought that they didn't need it and then something happened and it turns out they really do?
It really varies, right? I think it ties largely into the customer and your needs. Like a VPN is kind of a tool that is an intermediary tool that allows you to do something. But if you strip it away, like at the end of the day, it's I as a person need to assert that I am me and I need to get to this target. And so if there's a different way to handle or do that assertion that does not involve booting up this client, logging onto it, figuring out what you did with your token, figuring out what the password was if it's been changed. But if you can securely assert who you are and say what you need to get to, and it's that easy, then that's great. And there's more and more solutions coming about that are actually enabling that.
It's interesting. You know, I for one have been talking to a lot of companies recently that have said, you know, we don't need this anymore because we've created secure site-to-site VPNs with things like SD-WAN or even SASE, and it's all built in. And so I cringe when I hear that a little bit, because I kind of think about some of the things that I've heard, you know, the other things in IT that maybe have not proven true. You know, like 640K conventional memory is enough, or a firewall is good enough for, you know, perimeter security, or, you know, no one can crack DES. How impossible is that? And if you are laughing at any of the statements, you know that time basically invalidates all rules in security. And so even though we have very secure clients and very secure applications, I still think that this, you know, this idea, there's an additional layer of security that we can put on it. But one of the problems we run into is it's very clunky to do that. As I mentioned before, like I can still remember installing some very big VPN clients on my laptop and watching the list of networking adapters on my Windows system like triple, because there all have to be these sockets that they have to integrate with. And if I accidentally click on the VPN connection, it destroys everything else. We've evolved past that, right? Please tell me we have.
Some companies have, definitely. Others haven't, right? And it's really, it's about how difficult it is to set up, how difficult it is to get to an alternative. And then sometimes you have, you know, companies with these draconian security policies where it's like, you know, this has to be monitored and controlled at this level. And if the alternative can't provide comparable controls, then it becomes a non-starter. So it's really about making sure that you can provide convenience in accessing the resources you need with appropriate administrative control so that, you know, the company can protect their assets. And then, of course, an appropriate audit trail in case something goes wrong. You got to figure out, you know, what actually happened.
Yeah, the audit trail thing is critical, because one of the things that we're starting to see, there have been stories of people who have been permitting VPN access into the system that maybe they shouldn't. I know that one of the recent stories, as of the time of this recording, that we've been hearing about is a new ransomware gang called Lapsus that is allowing people to use a VPN connection to get into the internal file systems and take data out, and being able to have an audit trail that will tell you, oh yeah, hey, look, that connected at 3:35 in the morning and it really shouldn't have, is kind of an important factor. But kind of speaking to that, and maybe, you know, Gerard and Evan, you guys can weigh in here because you've been on that side. What about client policy documents that state unequivocally you must use a VPN in order to access the system? Like, is that like, are we cutting off our nose to spite our own face because we're enforcing it and people hate it and they're trying to find ways around it?
Yeah, I think part of the problem there is you probably have a lot of companies that are thinking old school where, okay, the VPN is a secure connection. If you're not in the office, you have to be on VPN because that's the only way to secure it. I disagree with that. It really depends on the transport. To me, a VPN just allows for that encrypted transport. But you know, I use Office 365 for email. My Outlook connection is encrypted as well. So if all I'm doing is Office 365, I already have that kind of, without a VPN client, a virtual private connection that is secured to Office 365.
That's a good
Yeah,
point.
it's a matter of perspective, right? And I mean, it's 2022. You know, the technology's changing. Yes, what once worked now is not. It's just a matter of, as Evan said, we want to be sure that to connect from point A to point B, that can be done in a multitude of ways, you know, especially with these newer cloud solutions. But it's just a matter of trying to get some people understand, hey, you know, while this may work, here's it's weighing the pros and cons and kind of showing them the value and the benefit in it. And as far as how it is you're connecting. A lot of, like I said, Office 365, same. You know, I don't really, you know, I use it, it's already pre-encrypted. We don't have to worry about that. We also use, you know, a lot of different suites that allow for that. So it's a matter of just kind of getting them to really truthfully understand, you know, what the value of the VPN is or isn't, and how it fits into your environment if it's needed at all.
So it
Yeah,
sounds like a lot of the VPN functionality that we've dealt with in the past is kind of being integrated into applications. I mean, Zane, is that what you're seeing, or do we still have a need for a system level encryption?
It's there's a couple aspects to that. First off, VPNs typically grant too much access, right? You've got this concept of this, your business is this old medieval castle. It's got the walls, it's got the moat, and then once you're inside this moat, you can access all the villagers and everything. And that's actually not necessary, especially when you think about maybe some of your third-party vendors, or like some Oracle contractor has to come in because he has to fix an Oracle system. Like, how does he get in to get just to that server? You give him VPN access, he can do all kinds of stuff. And so one of the problems with the VPN, even though certain company policies may require it, it gives you too much access. Why not give the person access to just the one device? You need to go to the Oracle server, great. This is all you get. You don't get anything else. And then when you think about the people, it needs to be easy. You don't want to install clients. You don't have to provision a whole bunch of stuff and have installations and operating system requirements. So the easiest is go to this website, type in a URL, and then at the end of the day, you're at your target. Like, that's the simplest use case. And then if it's audited and monitored and tracked, that's an extra Mario bonus.
I would tend to agree with you, and I do totally admit that the idea of a VPN client connecting your laptop to a network is the old school getting past the moat and the drawbridge kind of thing, without any kind of protection mechanism for the internal network. And as we've seen over the last few years, having an unprotected internal network is a playground for threat actors, for internal users that have nefarious purposes, and quite honestly, for things like ransomware and malware. It can hop and do lateral movement, privilege escalation, all those kinds of things. But as we've said before, it's hard enough to get the client authentication dealt with. How can you prevent people inside the network from accessing things they're not supposed to, unless you're having everybody tunnel through some kind of a web portal? I mean, I did VPNs back in the day, so obviously my perspective on it is a little skewed. Maybe Evan and Gerard can kind of weigh in here, but the idea of trying to limit what people can access through the VPN client, like, I get a headache just thinking about all the policies that I'm going to have to create on a per user basis.
Yeah, VPNs, the way most companies do it, it is that all or nothing type connection. Usually with a VPN client, it's the same access that they're going to have in the office, and it's really just it's designed to be an extension of the office. But yeah, giving that to a it's bad enough that I have to worry about the laptops that my company owns. Giving it to it, like, say, oh, we just need to have a consultant come in and with their laptop. I'm like, I am scared of what is on that consultant's laptop that the consultant may not even know about. That is, you give them a full VPN connection, and Zane, you're absolutely right. What is coming in my network?
I mean, I can't even tell you how many times that terrifies me and how many times I've been adamant against it, because when it's your fleet, it's fine. It's one thing. But excuse me, with every environment that I've worked in, and most recently, again, 2 years ago, I was working in healthcare, and that's what it was. It's all or nothing. But when someone would come in, be a resident, doctor, whoever, and it's like, hey, I got this laptop, or hey, I'm a third party contractor, I need access to your VPN. We weren't provisioning that. We weren't implementing or setting those policies. Okay, well, you can have access to this share and this share. It was just, okay, here's your VPN, here's your credentials, mimic the network. Good luck. And that's because you're pretty much opening the doors to what kinds of threats. I mean, all kinds of potential issues, especially for a device we can't manage. So now, you've upped the ante, and it becomes a headache and even more of a burden and a nightmare, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think from a management perspective, right, it's having to have your VPN team control and set up every one of these access vectors and networking routes and pivoting stuff off and creating subnets and VLANs and all that. It's way too much overhead, right? If you have a strong assertion of identity, like, this is Evan, then you can say, cool, I know who Evan is, and Evan's on this device, and I trust that device. Then you can say, well, Evan should be able to get to these things. And the teams can effectively self-manage and self-allocate. Like, the database team will decide if somebody needs access to that database server. And that way you're not constantly going to IT and saying, hey, can you adjust the VLAN, or hey, can you add this user to this group or do anything? It's really about allowing specific access based on a strong assertion of identity, getting to the targets, and getting just what you need. And then if it is a low trust employee, maybe like an intern or something, or maybe it's a contractor, maybe you still want to monitor and record the session, or like understand what's going on in there. Because if something goes wrong, log files are really difficult forensically to understand what happened, either intentionally, unintentionally, maliciously, or otherwise.
I add on to that, Zane. When you say you're going to trust Evan, I'm scared for you on that one. But what if that admin decides to go rogue? Part of me worries that we give admins need certain level of authority to do their work, and a lot of time that is very elevated. What if they lose access? A hacker gets their credentials, or worse, they go rogue and now they have access. You're granting them access. Being able to monitor what they're doing would be a great thing.
So
Yeah.
in a way, it almost sounds like what you're suggesting is a zero trust architecture, which is something that has been a very hot topic as of late, is that we don't trust anybody, even if they have a VPN client, until you've, like you said, asserted that we know your identity, we know what you're trying to accomplish. And even if you do get in, here are the things that you're allowed to access and no more, unless we have policy that allows you to do that. And the nice thing about policy is that you can define that, and that is something that can be registered and audited and revoked if necessary. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, 100% right. Zero trust is it's an evolution of something that's existed in the security industry. Secure principle of least privilege. It's got a new moniker, but that's exactly it, right? It's don't let somebody inside the moat and run around. Like just only give them access what they need. If somebody needs to access a server, a piece of infrastructure, a database, whatever that is, that's great. You need it to do your job. But it's interesting to ask the question, how long do you need it for? Like, do you need this indefinitely, or are you just doing something for this week? Because it's really easy to grant the access and forget about it, or grant too much access. Like, do you just need to read some data? Do you need to modify stuff? There's so many additional questions. And if you constantly have to go back to your IT team to do the mother may I, can you adjust this? It's too much overhead, too much administration. And they're like, whatever, here, just get the whole thing, and hopefully we won't have to hear from you for question number 45. Whereas if atomic teams can control access and revoke the access, like, hey, the database team can access the database stuff, we bring in the one guy, when he's done, we revoke his access. Those type of things really give the individual teams the flexibility they need to do their job. And then at no point does any one person have access to everything. There's no super admin with the keys to the kingdom. People just manage their individual fiefdoms or their areas of expertise.
Now, I know that we've talked about this before, and Evan and Gerard can weigh in here, but I love this idea of creating specific time-based accounts and having them automatically expire, because yes, anyone who watched war games in the 80s knows that a backdoor password is the worst thing in the world. It could start a global thermonuclear war. But I also know that trying to audit these systems and keep track of these things is practically impossible. Um, is there a solution now that allows people to do that says, hey, you've got these credentials that were created on this date with these usernames, and they probably need to expire, or when I create the credential, I'm going to set an expiration date? Because I know from my previous experience, those kinds of things really didn't exist.
Yeah, so technology has evolved. Within Keeper, we've got a couple of different solutions that could provide access depending on what your needs are. Like if it's, development systems needing access to credentials, and you only want them to be available to access for 1, 2, 3, 5 minutes, 30 days, whatever it is, you can provision access to those credentials and they'll expire. If it's sharing something externally with a contractor or something, you can audit, review, revoke. And then really the management of this, at least from the administration perspective, has really come a long way, to the point where you can know exactly who has access to what device, who has access to what credential. Was it accessed? Was it viewed? Was it opened? If somebody comes into one of your servers and actually, does some work legitimately, if you wanted to, you can go back and just view a recording of the session and, search the transcripts. Like, did they run a sudo command? Did they run a restart command? Like, you can really understand exactly what has happened. And if there are any events that occur that are suspicious, those are really a great candidate for like some type of an alert. It's rare that you run into an atomic event, which is, you know, Gerard downloaded malware. It's definitely bad. Let's quarantine him and throw him off the network. It's more along the lines of Gerard accessed the SQL server at 3 in the morning, and I don't know if that's inherently malicious or not. But if something occurred, maybe I want to get an alert and get notified about it. And you put it in a Teams or Slack channel, whatever it is, right? Whatever avenue makes sense for you to hear it. And then at that point, you'd be like, yeah, Gerard, we had a system down last night. If he wasn't in the database, I'd be beating him with a stick because it needed to get rebooted. Versus understanding the context of, well, we didn't have any events. Why did that occur? And then you can kind of peel back and understand what else happened, what else occurred at that time.
Yeah, and those are the kinds of things that require more horsepower in the system than we're used to if we're thinking all the way back to the old days of IPsec VPNs. Gerard, Evan, if you had that kind of a platform, would that make things easier for you? Would it allow you to kind of enable a lot of security controls that you wish you had now?
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think one of the big things for me is administrators tend to need a lot more rights than they may or may not really need. They want global admins, domain admins, all that. Sometimes you have to allow that, but being able to trust but verify would be a huge thing.
Yeah, it gives you that sense too, because I can't, how many times, okay, we'll set a contractor's AD credentials, and then yeah, sometimes human error kicks in, right? And you set expiration date, and that's it. But I feel with a solution like that, it could be a lot more granular. It gives you the flexibility and then some to really not just audit in real time. It gives you that opportunity to see, okay, well, what's going on in my environments, to police that a lot better and implement a lot of those policies and procedures and alleviate a good majority or a high percentage of the workload off of you. Because you're letting the tool and the solution do that work, as opposed to, again, trying to bring it back to manual human error. You're always going to miss something, but something like this can definitely police that.
Well, I think it sounds like the answer to the problem is that the traditional VPN, in fact, is not needed anymore because a lot of the functionality that we used to rely on it for has been built into applications and other things. But the need for the security is still there. And as VPNs continue to evolve into different kinds of access architectures using things like principles of least privilege and zero trust, we in fact do need them. We need the next generation of private networking constructs that allow us to audit and ensure that we're staying safe. As it were, if you want to use the medieval idea of a moat and a castle, this is creating a maze inside the castle walls where the attackers that are trying to get in get lost, but the people who know the shortcut through the maze can get where they need to go. And I think that honestly is a great way to kind of build on where we are now versus from where we have been in the past. Now, Zane, I know that Keeper Security has some solutions in this area that people definitely would want to check out if this is something that's interesting to them. Where can they go to learn more about it?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So keepersecurity.com. 3 products that are immediately relevant is our enterprise password manager. If you need to, broker and share secure credentials, our secrets manager solves the machine use cases of machine credential access, and then our keeper connection manager handles the connections to targets and recording and brokering those sessions.
Great. So if you want to learn more about that, go ahead and check out the website. And you can also check out the latest episode of our podcast when we release it at gestaltit.com/podcast. We have previous episodes there along with show notes if you want to check out links and things from those episodes. We should be back in a couple of weeks with a new episode talking about another interesting premise in IT. If you have a premise that you would like to see on the show, you can totally tweet at us. We're at OnPremiseIT on Twitter. And yes, we did use premise correctly. And if we see an interesting topic, we might suggest it to a group of IT luminaries to have a conversation about. But until we see you again, thank you very much for tuning in. We sincerely appreciate you listening. If you are following us on a podcast application that allows for ratings and reviews, please leave one of those, because a lot of people do read those to find out if the content on the episode lists is something that they want to take advantage of. So we'd love to see what you have to say about it. We will see you at the next episode. Take care and have a good day.